I want to bring in a member of that House Appropriations Committee, Democratic Congresswoman Madeleine Dean. It's good to see you once again, and I know you're getting ready to head into the hearing, but your Democratic colleagues on the committee say the proposed cuts would be disastrous to law enforcement and public safety. Why? What's your thoughts?
Well, as you pointed out, more than $545 million worth of cuts to an agency that is our chief law enforcement agency for the United States. But of course, it has such a role to play around the globe at a time. And the testimony from Kash Patel will tell you that at a time of heightened risk and insecurity and threats to our nation at home and abroad, they want to cut. They also have a revenge list that they're playing through. I just keep thinking of the more than 38,000 members, folks who work for FBI. They're not interested in these games. They're not interested in the president's revenge tour. They're interested in doing their job and keeping Americans safe. So we're going to question Mr. Patel very strictly to say why in God's name are they seeking these cuts. And also, I believe we will reveal his unfitness for this position. It is a critically important position, and the serious cuts that they are talking about are irresponsible.
Well, let me ask you about some of the things I think you're going to hear, because they are things we have heard before from members of this administration, which is that it makes sense to get rid of DEI programs, or at least reduce them, because they have not made us safer. And too much money is spent on pet projects. What would you say to that?
Nonsense. Absolute nonsense. What are they afraid of with diversity, equity, inclusion? I can't figure that out. Businesses know it's a good idea to have a diverse workforce. If you're dealing with the entire globe and our safety, I think it matters that you have a diverse workforce that understands the intricacies of different places around the planet or different places around this country. These so-called pet projects. I want to go back to what you said about the weaponization. You saw in Donald Trump's 120-word statement about FBI and what he wants to see happen there with these deep cuts. He wants to get rid of the weaponization of the FBI. The deflection in this group is unbelievable. They are weaponizing, trying to weaponize through Kash Patel, who is wholly unfit for this job. They're trying to weaponize the FBI and keep it from being the independent law enforcement agency that it should be. It is really scary. It is grave. We'll poke holes in that nonsense.
Meantime, your Pennsylvania House colleague, Congressman Chris Deluzio, told NBC News he sees a new divide in the Democratic Party, with the real battle not between the center and the left, but he believes it's between fighters and wimps. His words. Do you agree with him? Is that the state of your party?
I didn't hear the second word. The haters and what?
Wimps. He said it's between the fighters and the wimps.
That reminds me of an old book that Governor Rendell wrote, and he called some people wimps. I don't agree with Chris. Chris is a talented guy and a fabulous representative, and thank God we have him in our Pennsylvania delegation. I see in the Democratic Party a people of strong values, the very values that uphold the Constitution of the United States, the very thing that the president this past weekend said he wasn't sure if he was required to uphold. So no, I'm not characterizing Democrats that way. We are people filled with values, and our values happen to be to reveal our diversity. What this administration is looking at, take a look at the greater budget. I am newly on the Appropriations Committee, delighted to finally have gotten there, having served on appropriations in the Pennsylvania House. Take a look at the priorities and the values of this president. He wants to cut NIH funding by 40%. Take us away from being a global leader on research, medical research for cures and treatments, gene therapies and others. He wants to take away supplemental food. That hurts our seniors. This reveals their values, what they care about. They want to take away education funding and shutter the Department of Education. And all of this is in search of what? What they fail to talk about. Their end game, $4.5 trillion worth of increases, tax cuts to the billionaire class. Take a look at some of my Republican colleagues, and I'm calling out either the appalling silence of my Republican colleagues in the Pennsylvania delegation, or, as Representative Schmucker has recently said, the cuts aren't deep enough. Well, let's watch this and take a look at whose values reflect American values and reflect our duty, our oath to the Constitution.
We'll be watching the hearing, and I know you have to go to it. Congresswoman Madeleine Dean, thank you so much. Appreciate your time.
Why is this lady so important to the president?
Because he wants to rewrite history, right? So Tina Peters was the first person in the nation who compromised her own voting equipment to try to prove his big lie. She was convicted and sentenced by a jury of her peers in a conservative part of the state to 9 years of incarceration. But Trump is dead set on trying to pardon his political allies. He can't do that in this case because it was a state prosecution. And so he's weaponizing the DOJ to try to get his way. We're not going to let him do that. And we need to make sure that he's not allowed to rewrite American history with his lies.
It comes on the heels of Enrique Tarrio, leader of the Proud Boys, having dined at Mar-a-Lago, then sending out a message to all the J6ers saying the president loves you. It feels clear to me this isn't just about relitigating what has already happened. This is about creating a permission structure for folks who might want to mess with American elections in the future.
Yeah, look, I think that Donald Trump is hoping to build an extra legal, outside the legal system, a coalition. One could call it a gang. one could call it a militia. One could call it a cult, whatever it is. But he wants to build this cadre of people who are loyal to him and who will carry out his agenda when it comes to undermining free and fair elections. And, you know, I think the secretary, you know, as she knows, the Department of Justice right now is withdrawing its support from case after case after case around this country when it comes to voting rights. They are standing down in protecting the right to vote. They are flipping against black voters and other minority voters in these cases. Meanwhile, the Department of Justice has already filed in federal court in Colorado what's called a statement of interest to say that the Department of Justice, have an interest in this frankly state prosecution, which, you know, would, as you say, normally go through the state court system, and if there were appeals as things, they'd go through the state courts.
So just to clarify and drill down a little bit, because I think the whole state-federal judicial piece gets muddied for the public, and they don't know the limits that are in the Constitution on that, in that regard. So with respect to the fact that she was convicted under state law, right, the President of the United States, the Department of Justice, or any other federal agency cannot just come in and direct you or the governor or the courts there to undo what they did. What then are they absolutely trying to do besides they're bullying the system with their rhetoric? Is there anything they can do federally to gum up the works that makes it more difficult for you to stand on the ground that you're currently standing?
Well, they're trying, right?
We are back with former Secretary of Transportation Pete Buttigiig, as promised, and we're going to talk about a lot of politics. So let me just start here. There's been, to state the obvious, a ton of conversations about the future of the Democratic Party. You've been about a part of a lot of them. I think this is a really healthy thing that's happening right now. And I wanted to read you something Senator Bernie Sanders said this week that I think you probably agree with, but I just wanted to talk to you more about it. He said, the American people, I think, not only want resistance to Trump, but I think they want what the Democratic Party in the last many years has not given them. And that is an agenda that speaks to the needs of the working class because it's not good enough. Now, you may not agree with all of that. We should talk about that. This sounds to me, though, a little, I'm old enough to remember when you ran for the chair of the DNC and you made kind of a similar point. You've been kind of saying something similar. So I guess, what does that look like to you?
Yeah, I think this is really correct. Look, we have got to make sure that our opposition and everything that we're against, and obviously there is a lot to be passionately against right now, but it has to travel with a clearer picture of what we are for. Because there are a lot of voters who, for whatever reason, and Democrats might be shocked by this, but for whatever reason, did not find any of the things they've seen so far about Donald Trump to be disqualifying. And what that means is there's something else that, it doesn't mean they necessarily loved him, but they need to see something more. This is not a question of accommodating things that we don't agree with. or watering down or changing our values. It is a question of making very clear to everybody how your everyday life is different if we're in charge compared to if they're in charge. What your life could be like if wages went up the way that we propose that they be raised. What we would do with the money if we successfully stopped the tax cuts for the wealthy that are at the core of Donald Trump's economic agenda. What we think could happen in a country where we had paid family leave and some of the unfinished business of fixing our healthcare system. It's not just a matter of preserving the Affordable Care Act, as important as that is. It's going the next step to make sure everybody can get and afford healthcare. All of these things that need to happen, that needs to be as clear a picture as our response to the authoritarian tendencies of this administration. Because the truth is, proto-authoritarian governments don't just come out of nowhere. We would not be in this situation if the government, the economy, and the politics of our country were healthy. They've been unhealthy for a long time. I think everybody knows that. And if my party seems like it's calling for a return to the status quo from before, that will be both substantively wrong and politically it will fail.
The other part of that, there's been some, again, healthy debate about is, is it a policy question? Is it a messaging question? Is it a where you appear question? You've talked about all three of these. Let me just start with the policy question. Do you think the policies of the Democratic Party, the party you've been a part of, need to be more ambitious and bigger than what we've seen over the last couple of years?
In some ways, yes. Look, the fact that income inequality.
Donald is losing everybody. His cuts, his fascistic tendencies are losing people, are losing law enforcement types. These, again, you don't want to stereotype, right? You don't want to stereotype because the United States has got a third of a billion people. Not everyone fits in neat little boxes, but generally, law enforcement types. We've seen people leave the FBI over Trump. We've seen other channels have covered this. FBI people quitting, in some cases quitting because they don't want to work with Trump. They don't want to do it. In some cases being told if you don't quit, we'll fire you because how dare you do your job. A lot of people were removed or basically forced out or felt they had to leave because they were assigned to January 6 cases, and as law enforcement people did their job, right? And then now they're being attacked, right? So you're seeing this. All these moves are being done not in a good faith desire to lower police budgets, which I support. I'm actually a supporter of defund the police personally. But that's not what Trump's doing. The budget cuts are not meant to reduce the impact of law enforcement on, say, marginalized communities, black people and poor people and indigenous people, what have you. They're to help push his narrowing fascistic regime. And this is why you have people speaking out. And even in Colorado, you have Trump trying to free one of his people, one of the people that not only pushed the big lie in terms of her speech, but did things, illegal things, to try and prove the big lie happened, and in so doing committed a lot of serious felonies and never reckoned with that fact. Right? And then you see, what Pete Buttigieg is saying is, we need to actively resist this. And the way that happens, in part, is that Trump is leaving himself with very little allies. You think about it. People who lock folks up for livings tend to be Republican. They do. If you lock someone up for a living, it makes you more likely to be a Republican. And yet what Donald is doing is taking people who made locking people up their career and alienating them, which is wild.